Well, last week we began our new series, The Seven Paths of the Mystic. And we spoke of the Path 1 mystic, the one who's earth-centered, the everyday mystic who does what they can at home. This week we walk the path with the Path 2 mystic, the one bearing fruit. So, bear fruit. Jesus spoke of this when he said, "We cannot serve both God and mammon. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven." And for some of us, these words feel like a paradox. We know we're spiritual beings and we put God first, and yet we're also earthly beings and we have earthly needs. So where does that put us when we talk about abundance? Well, Joan Borisenko, in her book, The Seven Paths to God, which we're loosely following for this series, has a good story to tell about a yogi. His guru left him under a tree on a riverbank to meditate on God, and the yogi had only two possessions, his loincloth and a begging bowl. So once a day he'd walk into the village to beg for food, and the rest of the time he spent in contemplation. He washed out his loincloth one night, hung it on the tree, and when he got up the next morning, he saw that a rat had chewed it up. So he walked into the village, begged for food and for a new loincloth. And a few days later, he did the same thing. He washed out his loincloth and hung it on the tree, and you guessed it, the rat chewed it up again. So what was he to do? He got a kitten to chase the rat, but the kitten was hungry, so then he had to beg for food and for milk for the kitten. Then he found a stray cow, and all went well until the summer came and the grass burnt off, and then he had to beg for fodder for the cow as well. So the rainy season came, he planted some crops, and the crops did well, but he spent so much time farming that he had no time to meditate. So he hired some laborers to tend the fields, but they needed supervision, so he thought, I'll get a wife. So he got his wife to oversee the workers, but she didn't want to live under a tree by the river, so he had to build a house for her. And then, you guessed it, she got pregnant, and he had to build a much bigger house. So the yogi grew fat and wealthy by the banks of the river. And one day, as he was sitting under the tree, the guru returned. "Student," he said, "is that you? Didn't I leave you here 5 years ago to contemplate God?" The yogi said, "Teacher, I know it seems hard to understand, but truly, this was the only way I could keep my loincloth." So as I read this story, it reminded me of a time in my own life when I used to live in this very big house, and it was great. We had 2 music studios. We used to sponsor international students to come and live with us. I did a prayer service midweek with some of my Unity friends, and we also had some Unity classes in the house, so it was great. But at one point, we got to this point in time when it was very hard to manage, and we made a decision, and it's way too complicated, so we decided to sell it and downsize, and we bought ourselves a small unit. So I could really relate to that story. And isn't it interesting how the world can grab our attention? We think, oh, that's a great idea, I'll do that, and then I'll do this. And we lose our attention on the things that are really, really important. So Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added." And I think that that's an interesting thing to say, because he's talking about a sequence. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and then the other things will be added. And I think sometimes we do it the other way around. So in her book, Borisenko explains how creativity is connected to abundance. And she speaks of the male aspect and the female aspect and how they work together. She describes the male aspect as being our ability to express our gifts. And the female aspect is the receiver of inspiration. So when the male and the female aspects work together, it's like a marriage. It's right where creation occurs. And this is abundance. When we use our spirituality, our creativity, when we're inspired and we inspire others, that's when generosity of spirit comes into play and when we really begin to share our abundance. And if we pay attention to our male and female aspects, we can learn a lot about ourselves. Borisenko illustrates this by telling the story of a woman, Nicole, who runs a science lab. She has an overused male aspect, meaning she's really good at expressing her creative side, but she's a little bit rigid. She tries to control everything. And her female side, the receptive side, is underdeveloped. So she's not able to go with the flow. She finds it hard to receive inspiration. And no matter how much grant money she gets, she always thinks, well, eventually it's going to run out. And then Borisenko compares her to another scientist named Richard, who had a well-developed female aspect. He trusted that everything would move along as it should. He had a continuous flow of really great ideas, and he was inspired by the experiments they did in the lab. But his male side was underdeveloped. So he didn't control the laboratory. It was an undisciplined place. The workers came and went as they felt like. Experiments were not always completed, and there was a lack of boundaries in the laboratory. And so you see the marriage of the male and the female is very important, that we need to balance both of those aspects to be in a place of abundance. And it's a little bit like the artist who's so creative, fantastic painter, and they just can't quite get themselves organized to go to the studio and be disciplined in their painting time. So we have to balance those two aspects. The generous mystic understands the necessity of the marriage of the two aspects, that we need to be able to express our creative side, and we need to be able to receive inspiration. And when we can do that, we arrive at this point of generosity of spirit. It just becomes activated. And we see these qualities in good managers, good teachers, good doctors, good parents. They see their creative potential not only in themselves, but they see that in others as well. And they trust that everything they need will be provided. And this is a place of true abundance, where we know that we're co-creators with God, that we can manifest spiritually, financially, and creatively. The generous mystic is a practical person as well as one of faith. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus gives a great teaching on abundance. He says, "Do not lay up treasures for yourself on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." And so what do you treasure? What is most important to you, and where do you put your energy and your heart? We lay treasures in heaven when we allow ourselves to go with the flow, and I like to use the phrase, grow with the flow. We open ourselves to opportunities and we're able to seize hold of them. And so abundance really is a system of energy. It's based on faith and love, and it's not about personal gain, but it's about living in the field of infinite supply. And I think we should affirm that today. Say with me, I live in the field of infinite supply. Together, I live in the field of infinite supply. So a great example of the path to mystic is St. Francis of Assisi. And he's a model of abundance. He knows very definitely that he's a co-creator with God and that he is provided for. In the prayer of St. Francis, the opening says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Such interesting language. He's talking about creating things not from something that's material, but it's within us. We can co-create with God to create peace. And so it's really about creating a new reality. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there's despair, let me sow hope. And this is expressing the principle of abundance, that we can't give what we don't have. So if we find someone who's in despair, it's up to us to give them hope. If someone feels hatred, then we must sow love. That's how they will overcome feelings of hatred. And the prayer goes on, for it is in the giving that we receive. And we know that very well here at Unity. We declare this law of circulation every week in our love offering. It's a basic Unity teaching. We know that the more we give from love, the more we experience abundance. Not just as a transaction, but is a state of being. It is being in the spirit of generosity. The path to mystic knows that true abundance lies in our co-creation with God, that it is not about accumulation, but it's about circulation. And so the prayer of St. Francis was likely written 1 or 2 centuries after his death, but it does reflect his teachings very strongly, that he really understood what it meant to be creative and abundant and generous. So St. Francis' original name was Giovanni. Of course, he was born and grew up in the little Italian village of Assisi. His father was a prosperous cloth merchant, and they believe his mother was from French nobility. So he grew up, pretty well-to-do. He was a deacon, and when he was a young man, he wanted to be a knight. So he went off to war, and he was captured and put in a prison camp. And it said that there he heard the voice of Christ, which said to him, "Francis, go and repair my house, which is falling into ruin." Now, he took these words literally, and he began rebuilding a little dilapidated chapel, and that became part of his spiritual mission. But he's best known for famously denouncing his quite rich childhood, his upbringing, publicly in front of the bishop and his father, who were present. He took up his clothes, and I presume that he was wearing some sort of fine clothes that his father had provided him. And he put on a simple tunic that was tied with a rope or a cord around the waist, and that was his symbol of the life of poverty that he chose. He founded the Order of the Friars, which we know as the Franciscan monks, and they still wear that same tunic with the cord around it today. One of the texts that we know that he did actually write was the Canticle of the Creatures. And in it, he expresses a lot of abundance ideas, and he looks at all the gifts that come from God. Praise be you, my Lord, through sister water, so useful, humble, precious, and pure. And so here he's talking about water and the life-giving sustenance that it gives us. Be praised, my Lord, through brother fire, through whom you light the night. And so here's the brother fire, and I think that what he's talking about here is the creative spark that's within each of us that lights us up and makes us so excited about things sometimes. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us and produces varied fruits with coloured flowers and herbs. And so here he's talking of the abundance of nature, celebrating all the fruits and the flowers, and seeing that the universe is really a loving expression of the Creator. He relates nature to generosity of spirit. He sees how nature just willingly gives whatever we need with no expectation of any return. And this is really what generosity of spirit is, the willingness to give what is most needed. And then the canticle closes, "You cause the grass to grow for the cattle and the plants for the people to use and bring forth food from the earth." So beautiful words that really express divine provision, knowing that the universe provides for every physical need that we have. So it's said that there are 4 things required to develop the qualities of the generous mystic. We must have the intention to serve the greater good. We must know that the universe will provide all that is required for us spiritually and materially. We must understand that we receive as we give, and that our abundance is always expanded when we share it with others. And we must be practically grounded. We can't have a best-selling book unless we write the words. And so, in your bulletin day today, you have a reflection question, and there's an affirmation at the bottom. And I invite you to take that home and do a little bit of reflection work on it. And if you don't have a bulletin, there are spares of these at the back. You can grab one on the way out. That's your assignment for the week. So I'm going to leave you with a few suggestions as a path to mystic, the generous mystic. Notice your male aspect. Are you disciplined in your approach? Maybe you're a little too rigid. Do you have healthy boundaries? Take stock of your female aspect. Are you receptive to the creative? Are you open to new ideas? And do you follow your intuition? Look at how you manifest abundance practically. It's one thing to plant the seeds, but you have to water them. And are you practicing generosity of spirit, which means fostering a willingness to give where and what is needed most? And in the words of St. Francis, "Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister mother, Earth, who sustains us." And so we're going to declare together today, I am sustained. Together, I am sustained. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. And we say, I am an instrument of your peace. Together, I am an instrument of your peace. And where there is hatred, let me sow love. And we affirm together, I sow love. Together. And so it is. Amen.